Hello, and welcome to the latest presentation of the Rift Valley Webinar Series. My name is Martha Booker-Johnson, and I am the host for today's talk. If you are participating in the live webinar, you can submit questions or comments in the chat module of the Zoom application at any time during the presentation, or ask a voice question by raising your hand once the presentation is complete. Today's speaker is Roland Kießling. Roland is a professor of African linguistics at the University of Hamburg. He specializes in documentation and analysis of African languages with specific interest in phonetic transcription, morphosemantics, and language change. He has extensive experience in the field as well as numerous publications to his name and has worked on Cushitic, Nilotic, Niger-Congo, and Khoisan languages. Please join me in welcoming Roland as he gives his talk towards an epic matrix of the Rift Valley area.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and maybe we add oral literature to the spectrum, since today I want to share some basic ideas about a project that has been sizzling in my mind since years, even decades, without substantial progress so far. And that's the attempt to compile a catalog of narrative motifs, plots, and tale types that characterize the oral literature of Tanzanian Rift Valley cultures. Now, in philological terms, this aims at the so-called epic matrix. That's a term taken from the work of Harold Scheub, understood as a compendium of all narrative elements of an oral tradition, including their stereotyped patterns of figures, places, topics, plots, and accessories, something of the kind of a motif index of folk literature as outlined by Antti Arne and Steve Thompson, and followers such as Uta in a global perspective, and with a geographically more restricted focus like in Schmidt, 1989. So therefore, I want to avoid imposing a restriction on a single narrative culture such as Iraqw or Datoga or Sandawe or Rangi, but rather expand the scope to the Tanzanian Rift Valley, comparing motifs of the fictional narrative genre across Rift Valley cultures. For practical reasons, I've started putting things together from the vantage point of Southern Cushitic and Datoga, naturally, and gradually expanding from there along the lines of identifiable topics, plots, and figures, and combinations thereof, yielding tale types. Of course, this depends quite crucially on the documentary coverage, and it's always desirable to enlarge the epic corpus still, but we have quite some resources at our disposal, and I'm not talking about text samples and grammars here, but text collections in various target languages that come with translations, and those that only come in translation, since we can also tap the rich resources which are available in older literature, such as Cole Larsen, for example. Just focusing on Southern Cushitic and Datoga, there's a huge array of widespread tale types that may be subdivided according to central figures or protagonists as a first orientation. For example, the Iraqw Namboya Simboya tale type, which corresponds to Burunge Mandoya, and Alagwa Sindia or Muganga. Then there's the Iraqw Lách tale type that corresponds to Burunge and Alagwa Laa'ay. And then there are figures such as Ama Irmi, the female ogre of the Iraqw, and the giant monster ox Heidarer of Iraqw stories, which corresponds to Datoga Heidesh, the white bull. And there's Datoga giant snake Harar Joda, which corresponds to Iraqw Harario, and various others. And all of these characters have a specific profile, and they are linked with stereotyped plots of events to some extent. Before we start here, some inevitable methodological considerations. First, of course, we are faced with formats like this, and that is the full text. In this case, a translation, actually. In order to handle such bulky materials content-wise for comparative purposes, we need to condense this by what Thomas Geider calls reductive content notation. Basically, it boils down to reducing the content to a summary organized along the episodes of the story. And the episodes can be identified on the basis of 3 dimensions. That is chronological succession of events, that is the timeline, then the setting of the scene and the constellation of characters, which might change. For demonstration, here's a condensation of the well-known Iraqw tale type of Namboya or Simboya. And to bring this to life somehow, this is the story of a boy who is abandoned on a baobab tree by his father as punishment, since out of pity he had set free an elephant that had been trapped in his father's pitfalls. He is then rescued from that baobab tree by that very elephant, and he also acquires wealth through the elephant. Then he wants to inform his family about his well-being, and he tests various animals for their suitability as messengers. All fail, except for a little bird that sets out on the risky delivery of the message, finally succeeding so that the family reunites in the end. That's for a, well, basic exemplification. And here's another exemplification from the pool of ogre tales, which seem to be omnipresent in Rift Valley cultures. It's about a pair of siblings, brother and sister, who get lost in the wilderness as consequence of some mishap. And they have to stand the test of survival in a hostile environment. And this environment is personified by a series of antagonists who seek to kill them. First, they are captured by cannibals and fed to be eaten, but they manage to escape by outwitting the cannibal's grandmother, resembling a bit Hansel and Gretel in a way. Next, they inadvertently enter the house of the ogre Amairmi, where they run the risk of being eaten again. But they manage to outwit and kill her, and in doing so, they set free from her corpse all items that the ogre had devoured before, and they acquire wealth and a magic helper animal, a calf, which will become important in the next steps or episodes, since after that, they come to settle in a bizarre foreign land. The inhabitants envy them for their wealth and conspire to kill them, but they manage to escape assassination by help of their magic calf and have to flee from the pursuers in a magic flight, assisted by their calf again, to live in peace finally. So this type of reductive phrasing has the advantage of being brief and handy, and it also allows for convenient comparison of macro structures across different versions. And this is demonstrated in the table here. It's desirable to do this comparison since the tail type is attested in various versions that only partly overlap. For example, in the Berger collection under the title Laa'ay, and irritatingly under the title of Simboya in Camera. You find this type. Both versions are exactly parallel in structure, but they diverge in details. And the third version that I cite here, that is the Geso Dukan tale in Mous and Sanka, that lacks the first and second episode. And it also forces us to split up the third episode in two parts, that is 3a and 3b. It is only the acquisition of wealth and the magic helper calf that it shares with the other two versions, but this acquisition has a different backstory. It is not acquired by outwitting and slaying an ogre. And apart from this, the overlap is only in the episodes 4 and 5, after which it diverges again to continue with an additional episode which is absent in the other versions. This type of a very coarse resolution of the tale type at the macro level is helpful in a way in order to bring out these points, but it also lacks many more elements that make a particular tale type Rift Valley-esque. That is, it gets rid of most local flavor and it becomes almost indistinguishable from ogre tale plots all over the globe. So we need to complement the broader resolution type with some finer grained resolution and zoom in on individual episodes and salient details, which also contribute, of course, to the Rift Valley character of the tale. So it makes sense to recognize various levels of content organization, that is the tale type, the episode, and the motive. I find these useful. The tale type can be understood as the basic matrix of a story, its skeleton, so to say, its skeletal structure, a canonical succession of episodes at the macro level, which can be established on the basis of at least two independently realized variants. Then episodes can be defined as a unit of place, time, and protagonists in action, and their delimitation is by a change in figure, constellation, setting, or time, of course. And motives, finally. Motives may form part of the episodes, subordinate to the tale type, maybe also to the episode, or they could also be subordinate to the episode, understood to be a recurrent element that spurs on the action, a minimal constellation of action and its participants. And here is as an exemplification of a motive that can be labeled the rope trick. The rope trick, which is used by two children, brother and sister, in the tale type that I've just presented. The ogre is after them, the children, and the children have just managed to escape from confinement in the ogre's house onto some inaccessible elevated place, that's a tree or a rock. And in an attempt to get to the children, the stupid ogre proposes that the children pull her up to them with a rope. Pretending to obey, the children pull her up halfway and let her crash down repeatedly, finally killing her. And after each crash, the ogre finds excuses for the children, not recognizing their intention to kill her. She says something like, "Oh, my grandchildren, do not quarrel among yourselves. I know you are still weak," and something like that. Since the children feign a quarrel, reproaching themselves of having failed to properly lift her up. So this interaction adds a lot of spice and humor, and it has the function to conclude the episode of the confinement in and escape from the ogre's house, and it leads over to the liberation of the devoured items from the ogre's corpse and the acquisition of the magic calf, finally. And another example of what may be labeled, another example of a motif here, that may be labeled the drowning bull prank. In this, the trickster buries head and tail of a dead bull in mud, calling people for help to drag the bull out and prevent him from drowning. Now, as head and tail come out without a body, he starts raising accusations that they have killed the bull, and he successfully claims recompensation for that. And this motif frequently concludes the expansible image of the enforced profitable exchange in the tale type of Lách, or Laa'ay, to which I will come in a moment. Other widespread motifs found across Rift Valley cultures or fictional narratives include these. The list could be continued, of course. We have the rescue by a grateful helper animal from abandonment in a baobab tree. That's, of course, relates to the Namboya, Simboya tale type. The ogre swallows the entire world except for one pregnant woman, which occurs in the Geider and Dauder Haydash complex, and so on. I'm not going through these now, but maybe to point it out here already, we have the magic flight, which has already been mentioned to occur in various tale types. Now, the next thing to mention here or to point out, motifs can take the form of expansible images. That's a term taken from Schoip's work on the Osa Nzomi stories. The crucial ingredient here is repetition. It can be viewed as a minimal plot whose structure is repeated with systematic alteration of one of its variables. That is the same type of interaction between hero and antagonist is repeated with different accessories. So the same type of procedure recurrently undergone in loops. This can be exemplified by the magic flight, a common motif in folk literature worldwide, actually, and it's also registered in the motif index of Thompson. It has a code there and is characterized. It features actually on the obstacle flight and is characterized as in this quote, fugitives throw objects behind them, which magically become obstacles in pursuer's path. Lách, 1950, has a more elaborate definition or characterization. We are not going to read this because we will turn to the specific Iraqw version of the magic flight. In this, it is the ogre ama irmi or cannibals who chase the hero, and the hero has a magic helper animal, typically a calf, as already been mentioned, and this calf creates obstacles of different kinds to delay the ogre. And the ogre always overcomes these obstacles in specific ways, which of course lend vividness and color to the narration, and at the same time it creates suspense in that they retard the development of the plot. And the final obstacle is insurmountable, or it kills the ogre. This motif is not restricted to a single tail type, but it's attested across two tail types at least, namely the Laa'ay type that I've just presented a few slides ago, plus the tail type of Geider, which is another one, Iraqw one, and even a third one, Görög-Karady, if we count it separately. So this shows the modular character of motifs. They seem to present narrative building blocks that can be fit into different tail types for similar functions or purposes. And the expansibility of it, I've called it expansible image, or taken it over from Schoep. The expansibility comes out most clearly in a comparison of these, 8 versions. The first 3 lines in this, the first 3 lines identify who the hero is, who his antagonist, and which type of helper animal assists the hero in that particular version. And it also shows that there is a roughly canonized order to the types of obstacles and the strategies, how they are overcome. And I've tried to highlight this by different coloring. The first obstacle in blue is usually the calf's dung that turns into thorns or burrs, and the pursuer usually overcomes them by returning to the house to fetch sandals in order to trample them down. The second obstacle, that's the green one, is usually an abyss created by the halves treading vehemently on the ground. And this is overcome either by hoeing or by fetching tree trunks in order to bridge the abyss. The final obstacle, the red one, is a lake from the calf's urine, in which the pursuers drown, or which makes them give up in the end. The versions in the last 2 columns deviate from this pattern in that they swap obstacle 2 and 3. And the last version has an additional obstacle. And the versions, 5 and 6, they contract obstacles 1 and 2 in that the calf's dung does not produce thorns, but rather the abyss. And version 3 has reduced the series of obstacles to just 2, and in version 4, the entire magic flight remains rudimentary, reduced to a single obstacle only. In the next slides, I want to focus on one particularly charming tail type that is known as Lách among the Iraqw and Laa'ay among the Burunge and Alagwa, following up on Martin's work, which is cited in the bottom of this slide, but with an attempt to extend the scope, both in terms of methodology and narrative cultures considered here. So using 3 independent Iraqw versions of Lách as a basis, the plot unfolds in 6 major episodes, and this is summarized in the idealized structure given in this table. The 3 versions used as point of orientation here are cited in the bottom. It all starts with Lach's mother promising her unborn child to an ogre, or let's call it an antagonist first of all, in return of helping her out of a dilemma. There are 2 types of dilemmas that occur in these key versions. Lach's mother consults a soothsayer as her pregnancy comes to a standstill and the embryo stops to grow, or she is out collecting firewood with other women, overburdening herself and asking Lách, that is the old man of the bush, for help. Both situations result in her promising the unborn child to the antagonist. Now, directly after this birth, Lách is already fully grown and manages to escape all attempts of his treacherous parents to extradite him to the ogre. Instead, he turns their tricks against them so that they finally fall into their own traps and get killed themselves. And this unfolds in 3 distinct sub-episodes. First, Lach's strategies to counter his parents' complot unfold in a kind of burlesque, expansible image. He defeats their conspiracy with the ogre and counters every plan by virtue of his supernatural powers to foresee the details of their conspiracy, concluding with a final trick which results in his father getting caught by the ogre instead of himself. Second, Lách continues to fool his mother by pretending to be her husband and having her serve him with all types of nice food in a kind of fake celebration of the final success of their plan of getting rid of the problem child. As finally Lách reveals himself triumphantly, the 3rd episode, or sub-episode rather, has his mother planning to poison him, but Lách manages to have her eat the poisoned food so that she dies in the end. So the overall outcome of this episode is his father has been killed by the ogre, his mother poisoned, both victims of their own deadly plans. And that's the end of episode 2. And in the next one, number 3, Lách extends his revenge to other parts of the family. Living in his sister's home, he kills her husband in a trapping pit, bringing his meat as quarry, and he tricks his sister into cannibalism and to accidentally kill her own baby and involuntarily cause his magic escape from her rage. And this also develops in 3 sub-episodes. We have, first of all, the killing of the sister's husband and Lách bringing his meat as quarry to the sister. Then next, there's the revelation of the cannibalistic atrocity in a telltale lullaby sung to the sister's baby. And the baby accidentally gets killed as the sister attacks Lách with a pestle in her fury. As soon as she understands what he's actually saying in his song, that is revealing that she has eaten her husband. And Lách, in this situation, when attacked by the pestle, he fends her blows with the baby to whom he was singing the lullaby. What a tragedy. Finally, the sister inadvertently effectuates Lach's magic escape from her rage, and in a final chase, her efforts, she tries to make people stop Lách, but this fails since Lách tells the people that they simply run a race for fun. And finally, they come to an obstacle where Lách turns into a stone and has his sister inadvertently fling him in the shape of a stone, fling him across the obstacle in her fury. The next episode, that's number 4, sees Lách traveling from one place to another, accumulating riches by freely offering goods to various parties and committing them to refund him with other commodities that have a higher value than the ones he had offered initially. In 5, Lách is deprived of all these riches by an overpowering oppressor. That could be a lion, that could be the ogre Amayirmi. And he makes a narrow escape from the oppressor's attacks by flight on top of a tree. And in 6, he from the top of the tree, he tests the animals to help him confront the antagonist's force, the brute force of the antagonist. All animals fail, taking the side of the antagonist, except for one helping companion, which is usually the cat, who rescues Lách, confronting and killing the antagonist by its claws. So Lách is saved, and that is the final resolution of all conflicts. And this macro structure, I mean, the justification of this, it emerges as a common denominator from a comparison of the three different source texts that are independent from each other in space and time, cited in the bottom here. Now, the point is that individual episodes of this tale type have been reported elsewhere in a larger variety of sources, not only from an Iraqw background and not only Southern Cushitic, that is Burunge and Alagwa, but also widely spread across East African Bantu, as this list indicates. Now, the model of the idealized macro structure puts us in a position to effectively compare different versions by relating them to our established frame of reference. This functions like a coordinate system now, as done in this table, which gives a survey of different Iraqw versions plus Burunge and Alagwa included. And this reveals several points. Within the Iraqw tradition, which is covered by the first 6 versions, the 6 columns mentioned here by abbreviations. Within the Iraqw tradition, we can find versions that lack entire episodes. So the versions in Nordbustad, that's the 4th one, and Camera, the next one, they only include the episodes 4 and 5. That is the accumulation of wealth by profitable exchanges and the deprivation. And another version in Camera, that's the last one in the Iraqw slot. That one only has the episodes 1 and 2. This again seems to demonstrate the modular character of episodes. They exist independently in individual versions and can stand on their own in an epic culture. Now, as we extend comparison across individual epic cultures, including Burunge and Alagwa versions of Laa'ay now, we see a similar picture emerging. Both Burunge versions of Laa'ay diverge in various respects from the Iraqw ones. First, the antagonist is not an ogre, but the lion. And the child's extradition to the lion is not motivated by some type of debt that the family owes to the lion, but rather by the wish of the parents to get rid of their weird child. And this is why the plus for episode 1 is in brackets here. One can think of other types of representing this, of course. Continuing with this, between episodes 3 and 4, both Burunge versions have an additional episode, or actually several episodes are inserted here, which elaborate various pranks that Laa'ay plays on the lion. After 4, both versions take a different course and a different ending. Laa'ay has made friends with the cock, and he envies the cock for his alleged ability to send his head traveling independently of his body, as the cock uses to put his head under his wing, which seems like he's without a head. And Lách foolishly advises his wife to behead him so that his head can also travel. And this is how Laa'ay meets his end. As for the Alagwa versions, we see an episodic complementarity similar to the Iraqw versions. One version is restricted to episode 4, that's the profitable exchange, while the other one has episodes 1 and 2 with a continuation that deviates from episode 3. Okay, and here we enlarge the picture by including a survey of different versions attested across Eastern Bantu, Mbugwe, Nilamba, Ihansu, and Nyanja. These versions all share episodes 1 and 2, lacking 3, and they do not expand beyond, except the Mbugwe version, which has episode 4, the profitable exchange. And the Nilamba version has the hero acquire, or if we want to call him a hero, he acquires wealth, though not by profitable exchanges, but rather by cheating the chief's sons and stealing their inheritance. Interestingly, the story continues along the line of the Laa'ay tale type. That is, the hero evades assassination by help of an animal, which is not a calf in this case, but a dog, and he escapes by a magic flight. Okay, as we zoom in on individual episodes, we find a considerable overlap, but also variation. So this table shows variation of the expansible image of the profitable exchange across different versions. And the comparison points to a roughly canonical order of acquisition with constantly increased values of the acquired commodities, from bird to grains to feathers, knives, chicken, he-goat, bullock, and finally a herd of cattle or calves. And it also shows that the narrator of number 3 in the third column must have been in very high spirits to elaborate this expansible image by 13 loops. This motive of profitable exchange is widespread globally, attested by its presence in the Arne Thompson Uter motive index, and it's also attested in other parts of Africa, for example, among the Baule and Babanki. But the Rift Valley variety of this motive has its special features. For example, Lach's trading partners do not provide their goods out of free will. Lach rather demands them as compensation for a debt they have incurred inadvertently, because Lach deceitfully makes them believe that he offers his own commodities for free, which is not the case. And remarkably, none of his partners ever seem to complain and question the legitimacy of Lach's claim to be compensated for something that he had offered under false pretenses, as if it was for free. So I would rather opt for the entire episode to call it enforced profitable exchanges. Might be a better label here. In some versions, Lach's claim to be compensated is elaborated in a cumulative formula in which he recounts the entire history of acquisition, which could become quite long, as you can see here. I'm not going to read all of this, but you see the principle. Pay me for my goat. I got it from the people who ate my hand, which was given to me by the people who cut grass by the outer corpus of the maize stem, who broke my knives, and so on and so forth. And it frequently ends in the formula, I am Lach, my things must be paid. There is also variation and overlap in the expansible image of extradition to the ogre. And this is what you see here. Lách is never directly handed over to the ogre. Instead, there is a set of stratagems applied by Lach's mother to extradite her child by creating a situation in which it can be cornered by the ogre who lies in ambush for him. There's a variety of stratagems that come in different orders, as you can see here. First mentioned here is Lách is sent to collect some vegetables in the field to be caught by the ogre there. And he counters this either by sending an insect instead of himself to do the job, or by transforming himself into an insect, or by calling all his friends to join him collecting so that he is camouflaged in the group. And this is actually his basic strategy to counter other methods that are applied in the following to mark him off as individual, to be picked out from the group of other children by the ogre. And Lách counters all these plans by encouraging his playmates to do like him, that is, to get themselves a special patch on their garment, for example, or a specific haircut, so that the ogre fails to identify him. And finally, they always say, we are all Lách. And sometimes they even say, let's beat up that old man. Finally, the ogre is advised to come to the house at night and pick Lách in the dark by instructing him about his sleeping place. And Lách counters this by swapping sleeping places with his father, so that his father is caught by the ogre instead of him in the end. How bad? Coming back to the initial episode, this table points out the overlaps and differences in crucial constituents, such as who the antagonist is and why Lach's parents intend to extradite him after all. The antagonists vary between the old man of the bush, that's an ogre, and various dangerous animals, like you can see here. And the parents' motives to promise the child to the antagonist also vary. The most common one has already been mentioned in the Iraqw version, that is compensation for helping a pregnant mother out of a dilemma, a problematic pregnancy, or helping her lift a firewood bundle under which she has collapsed. And this is also the case in the Mbugwe version, and in other cases the parents have to settle a debt, or they simply exchange the unborn child for meat. In Burunge, both Burunge versions, there is no debt to be settled with the antagonist, but rather the parents are afraid of the unnatural behavior of their child, and they seek help to get rid of it. Lách and his other colleagues across Rift Valley cultures may be regarded as instances of a figure which could be called wonder child or precocious child or enfant terrible, a male figure found across many epic cultures. And here you see a brief profile following Geider's characterization. He's very clever, cunning, and reckless, even cruel, equipped with magical powers to foresee complots against him and to transform himself. And he also always behaves in abominable ways, violating social norms, disregarding all authorities. Often also his birth is somehow supernatural or abnormal. In some cases, he can be found to instruct his mother from the womb. Sometimes he is born from the shin or the knee, and immediately after birth, he is already fully grown, performing ordinary tasks of a boy. And by virtue of this characterization, there is interference and overlap with other figure types, such as trickster, a cultural hero, or an ogre slayer. Now, indeed, in Iraqw, the human figure Lách is frequently identified with the animal trickster, which is the hare. For example, in Nordbustad's variant and in Camera, we find that. Camera 1976 and 78 both also have another name, which is given here, namely Musculanga, for the person in the Lách plot, which seems to be related to the Ihanzu version of the name Massaculanqua. This is just an observation on the side, comparative one. And now I come to the end. Should be time for it. So these are my comparative suggestions for a motif index of the epic matrix of Tanzanian Rift Valley cultures, an index that is narratologically and folkloristically informed. A basic point here is to explore the structural aspects of the imagery of oral narratives in their own right, independently of linguistic structures and performative aspects, focusing on the content that is retrievable from the narrations themselves, irrespective of whether these are in their original language or in translation. In the case of Laa'ay, we see a quite elaborate and complex tale type with what seems to be a canonical succession of 6 episodes, and these episodes occur independently elsewhere. So one may ask, are these then somehow corrupted versions of the complete tale type, or are they rather predecessors and forerunners of the complex tale types, that is, modular building blocks that may be arranged in different ways, some of them coagulating to form more elaborate structures? From the evidence presented so far, it would seem that some motifs are indeed polyvalent in that they can be fit into different tale types, as we have seen with the expansible image of the magic flight that occurs in the Iraqw tale types of Laa'ay, then Geso-Dukang, and Geider, and in the conclusion to the Nilamba version of Lách. And this raises some more questions about the consolidation of tale types and the degree of freedom that narrators grant themselves to combine motifs in novel ways, and how these may eventually be exploited in modern creative fiction, similar to what Amos Tutuola has done with the imagery of Nigerian oral literatures. But in order to find an answer to questions such as these, we need the internal perspective, that is, aesthetic judgments of cultural insiders, of course. Thank you very much, and hopefully you have suggestions and revelations. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We can now begin the question and answer section. The question and answer section will be open to voice questions as well as written questions. If you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand in the non-verbal controls present underneath the participant panel, and I will send you a request to unmute. If you prefer to ask a written question, that is also still possible. You can do so using the Zoom chat module, and I will read out the question. Please remember that the webinars are recorded so that if you ask a question, this will be part of the recording and will be released on the YouTube channel. Maarten?
Yes, thank you, Roland. Yeah, marvelous. First of all, this picture, where did you get it from?
Well, it's not from Tanzanian background. It's taken from, I think it's a postcard that I bought in Japan.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I find it a beautiful talk, and I'm like you, I'm a big fan of all these stories. And I also thought that, yeah, Andrew has been suggesting now to do a series of research meetings in the Rift Valley, and maybe one thing we could do, Andrew, would also to be reading these stories and to look for all these motifs and episodes. I think I have two concerns. And one is what you're trying to do is to find a balance in abstraction and in detail, because it is especially in the detail that you find the striking similarities, and it is in the abstraction that you see what you can compare. And when you compare a story like the Lách story, there is the danger of where do you start to compare? There's another Iraqw story that we have. I think you know the one that you used. Lách was from the collection with Sanka was. The Lách was not getting out of the womb of his mother. I have another story where the other motive, that's the beginning of a pregnant woman who needs to be helped and is refused to be helped with the firewood, and that continues in a completely different way. No Lách resemblances until the old man gets children out of his knee. But what comes out of his knee is not the next hero, but it is three girls and then who are kidnapped, and then so superficially to me I would say that's a different stories, and yet there are episodes that coincide, and I'm sure there are many other stories that so how to compare episodes and how to compare motives. That is my that's what I see as a challenge.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't think that I have a full-fledged answer to this, but one must start at a point. And I think, as I have laid out the different levels that you have also now identified with the episodes and the motives and the tale type, these seem to be useful, and they can well. We have the Geso Dukan, which does not, which only partially fits, and it continues in a different way. I also have it I've suppressed this somehow in my, or to some extent, I've suppressed it in my presentation, since the Burunge versions, they have an intermediary. Well, it's not only one episode, but it's in one version you get a whole series of further episodes, you would say, pranks played on the lion, and which might be identified as independent motifs which are strung together, and in the end it comes back to the Lách plot. But it ends different, or it has another episode of the Lách plot, and then it continues differently, still with a different ending. That's as far as I remember. But isn't it possible to actually depict it using this episodic notation? And I think the secret of it, or the secret of it resides in the way you formulate the episodes and the degree of abstraction that you allow for it. And this should be considered in a serious way, or in a pondering about or on methodology, I would say. That would be a crucial issue to be targeted. But I would be interested in the versions that you have. They don't strike a familiar note now. It would be interesting to have the exact reference to those versions which deviate so much. You mentioned the girls who are born from the knee. Yeah, that's a different motive, which occurs independently elsewhere, of course. It's also in the Burger corpus, for example. And yeah, if you could mention those, not now, but later maybe, it would be very interesting to see how to integrate it into the type of notation that, or the path that I've just tried to follow. And otherwise, of course, it's a great idea, and I want to include the details. That's why I've made such an effort to list them all in these comparisons like this, where you also get different orders. But this also runs into problems, since you somehow want to reduce the number of individual stratagems here in a way that you also still could cover the variations that you get. So there are different haircuts involved, and which seem to be random, but what do we know? I wouldn't dare to say that they are random. And about coming back to your first remark, of course, this the postcard or this monster here is ideal with all these eyes, which remind us of Ama-Irmi.
Just for fun, one piece of information: the Sagala of the Taita, they have a word Lachu, meaning the shrewd man.
Wow, thank you.
So Andrew comments in the chat, I had a short story told to me in Görög about an Laa'ay, an old man who lives in the forest and is covered in eyes and who can appear and disappear at will. I didn't interpret it as a monster, but of a leopard whose spot pattern looks like eyes. I wonder if there is a syncretism here between the ogre and the animal in this case.
I wouldn't dare to, I don't know. Of course, now that you mention it, that's never occurred to me actually to see a parallel, but do you have a reference to this story?
Let me look for it.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Hope?
There must be Lách in Görög.
My question is about the antagonist of the ogre and the qualities that the ogre has. And what brought this to mind is that there's only very few stories in sign language in Kenya that I've seen myself. I'm sure they're shared more widely, but one of them has a giant, what was translated as a giant, because of course you know, working through a gloss translation, I don't know what, maybe it is actually an ogre, but I don't know the properties of ogres. So what are they?
Well, the basic property is that the ogre swallows or devours people, and not only people, but well, things. Basically in most of the stories, or in one of the tale types, let's put it like that. In one of the tale types, the ogre swallows the entire world, and he leaves just a pregnant woman. And the continuation of the story is about the pregnant woman giving birth to twins, and the twins start asking about the emptiness of the world. And so the mother tells them, yeah, there's this monster or this thing which has devoured it, and the twins set out in order to find it and to hunt it and to bring it down. And finally they succeed, and they liberate the devoured world from the ogre's corpse. So basically that's the characterization of the ogre. But if we look more closely at the particular Iraqw ogre, Ama-Irmi, you can even characterize her. First of all, it's a she, female, and a giant, and she has some further properties or characteristics, like she can bring out eyes across her whole body, and she kind of hypnotizes her victims so that they cannot really escape from her, or they are somehow paralyzed. That's one thing. And she's stupid, or characterized as stupid in several versions. And she's not single. She might have a sister, and there seems to be a whole species of Ama-Irmis. That's what comes to my mind now, but of course it's worthwhile to follow this up and write a profile of Ama Irmi as depicted in Iraqw stories. Martin, you remember our excursion to Quadinu, Alagwa, where we had children making pictures or drawing pictures of Ama Irmi, and they came up with very strange pictures, like the whale, wasn't it? But of course, that's a different track of investigation. I hope to have answered your question.
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. Very interesting.
Andrew?
Thanks, Martha. Roland, I'm still looking for the old man of the forest reference, but I wanted us to jump, if we could, to slide 21. And I noticed that when we were looking at these Bantu tales, or these Bantu versions of the tale, what we have consistently absent here is the damage to the sister's family. And I find this interesting in its consistency, and I wonder if it has to do with kinship. So we know that Lách is an abominable kind of guy, but would he be allowed to essentially, like, you know, to ruin the family of his sister if it were a society that were matrilocal or that were matrilineal? And
Well,
when I see this, I think about Görög, for example. I mean, when your sister moves away, I mean, you know, she's considered your kin, yes, but not super close, right? Whereas a sister in a matrilineal society, I mean, they're probably be living very close to where you grow up as a child, so they would be somehow closer. So I wonder if this is the reason why this particular episode isn't entertained with Bantu speaking.
Well, I wouldn't dare to generalize on this because the comparison at this stage is actually based on these 4 additional versions. And in order to have this consolidated, somehow we would need more attestations. And then at a certain level, I would agree that this is really a decisive gap. But I have no answer to your question. Of course, it's interesting to note that it's lacking across all these varieties or versions.
Thank you.
Federico?
Hi. Thank you, Roland, for the really interesting talk. I just wanted to, I just had a comment. In Senguer, I've just started looking at folk tales, and I found it quite striking that there was a magic calf. Because they also have a magic calf, but it's the ogre. The ogre is the magic calf. So that was strange. So apparently there's like huge giant calf that has a single eye that looks like the moon, and that is sort of the bad guy of a few stories.
Okay,
so I thought that was an interesting thing. Just to...
Thank you for the observation. This would put us in a position to have a completely different characterization and maybe different story motive here.
Yeah, I mean, the stories are different. I just thought the parallel with having this calf was strange.
Indeed, yeah. Now the calf in all of what I've seen in Southern Cushitic narratives, calf seems to be positive across all of them.
Yeah, it's strange that it would be, and the calf eats people. This calf, it eats children and has a giant eye. Those are the
Giant eye. So it's
one giant eye in the middle of the head.
Cyclopean.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anyways, that was just a small comment. But
this is outrageous.
Yeah, Roland?
Yeah, Roland, thank you so much for the talk. Just on this slide, also slide 21, I saw that in Mbugwe and Nihanzu, the antagonist is the lion, and then in Nilamba, it's the python. And I was wondering how, yeah, Martin is nodding, how these relate to each other. How do they compare? And is there any reason for these animals to be the antagonist? What's behind it in terms of view on these animals?
Nice questions. I have no answer except for saying that they are wild and ferocious and threatening, dangerous.
Okay.
Maybe others have more ideas about that. I mean, the lion is also the antagonist. No, it's not shown here. It's somewhere else.
It was
Here.
in slide 25. Yes, this one.
So you also have the lion in Burunge and Alagwa as an antagonist.
Yeah.
But the common denominator was that it's any type of dangerous animal. Otherwise, I have no explanation.
Yeah, I'm asking because I've been seeing more connections between pythons and lions. So as you know, the python in Nilotic, at least in Eastern Nilotic, is Kitun, and in for also Eastern Nilotic, it's reconstructed. The lion is reconstructed as Ngatun, so they share a root with this prefix, and that's something that just struck me. And I've been seeing other lion python connections elsewhere. So it strikes me that also in these stories they share a kind of a role here. What do you think?
Can you repeat that? Of course, Ngatun is lion in well, it's also in Southern Cushitic. But what was the python again?
He's typed it in the chat. We can save the chat.
And on this note, I don't know if you have something to add to that.
Well, it's striking to see that this similarity, and I remember, or seem to remember, that the nga is actually a prefix, yeah, and ki as well.
Yes. So they share a root somehow distinguished by a prefix. But that is
nice.
That was just one example of how these lions and pythons are kind of
related
in each other's waters. Yes, so Federico is also mentioning Ararjod in Datoga. It was one of the first slides where you gave the list of the ogres and the monsters.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Harario in Iraqw and Hararjoda in Datoga are the giant snakes. And I saw in the West Rift dictionary that the West Rift word, the Proto-Iraqw word, seems to have its origin in Datoga. And what makes you think so, is my question.
A phonological evidence that it would be easier to assume a simplification of the palatal plosive y to y than the other way around, to get a voiced palatal plosive out of the blue if it was the other way around.
Yeah.
Also, there's a morphological argument that is the final da, and I've probably cited, probably I've missed the tone here. I don't remember that there's probably a final high tone on the Harario, but I'm not quite sure now. I haven't really paid attention too much to the phonological details for this presentation.
Thank you.
But I think the phonological and morphological arguments are kind of compelling.
I just wanted to note that there were a couple of comments from Federico in the chat about this conversation about about the lions and the pythons. Maybe that there's an antagonist python in Datoga. And Federico, these two words, what are these two words that you've...
Yeah, both words are in Griscom 2018 dictionary of Asimjeg. So I just thought it was
and Ararjod.
Yeah, and Ararjod is with a final high tone, like you said. Sorry, I just typed it quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wonder what those stories are as well. Maybe
I have not yet fully analyze them nor fully transcribe them, but they are I have versions of their narrations of Harar Joda, a giant snake, which and it resembles somehow like the world is devoured and it's just one pregnant woman that survives. She gives birth to twins, and the twins hunt down the python in this case, or the giant snake.
Right. So very very similar to the ogre story. So the snake just takes on that role.
Yes, and you have cited that from Asim Jake, RRQ, that's Richard's work, which is
it's Richard, and also Akashed is also there. I don't know about that.
I think I have it in Gisam Janga, but not as a python. But I think the meaning is Akashed. It means trouble. It has been given us, but I have to check it. Thank you,
Marta?
Yeah, I was just reacting on this Python. Python, they occur in several of the Iraqw stories, and I think what we would need is what Roland was suggesting in the beginning with the proposals by Thomas Geider, that for the catalog we also need these main characters and what their behavior and the attributes are. And I had the feeling that the Python in the stories is a different kind of antagonist compared to the lion. They are have less initiative in a way. I don't know, but it would be. I think it would be nice to do that as well, in addition to the motifs and the episodes to describe the.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I fully agree with that, and to write profiles of the individual antagonists and see in which context they appear in order to see how they differ in the end. Yeah. And one addition maybe, I see this now that I scroll down in the chat. Jeroen, you ask about the jod as a suffix in Asim Jek. I would see it as the suffix. There are two suffixes actually. One is the D and the other is O. And the J probably belongs to the lexeme.
Nicholas?
Yes, hello. Could you please go to slide 7? And also thank you for the talk. It was very interesting to hear. But also a very curious aspect was, well, I've been working with Martin Mous on some of the Iraqw stories that he has recorded. And as a general theme, I see that just a lot of the episodes are also just mixed and matched throughout. That there are some tendencies that you have outlined, can also acknowledge those, but there's a lot of mixing and matching going on everywhere. And this was, I think, one of those. So here you said that there is this ending found in this Iraqw story, but not the beginning. And I connected it with the Agha story in my mind, which has the beginning, but has a different ending. So it jumps to the rope trick from exactly the point where the other story starts. And yeah, the magic buffalo, that also reminded me of the Klembas story, which is different in many respects, but I was thinking about it because this is curious because it has a shift in the protagonist. So that made me think of maybe there's also mixing and matching going on there. And I wanted to actually ask if in any of the stories where you see that the episodes shift between the narrative, do you also see a switch in the protagonist in other cases?
Well, that's a complex question, and I feel I'm not in a position to give a satisfying answer. That would entail to look at many details, at least in those which are mixed up. Yeah, those are in which you get the mixtures. I couldn't say.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe you can say it again. The episodes you mean you're driving at the point that there's an insertion of an episode, in different episode in is it Geso Dukan?
There's this Slembas story, which starts with the buffalo and the lion living together happily in a cave. And then suddenly they get into a fight, and then the buffalo escapes. And then the man that starts protecting the buffalo from the lion becomes the main character. The buffalo gets very little agency from that point on. The man has all the control. But up until that point, the buffalo has been asking people for help. And yeah, so it seems like there's a switch in the protagonist, which is why I also really like the story.
The role that they play, the prominence of roles, and
but also there's this new character that suddenly becomes important, and then the previous one, they have no agency, they're just there.
They are forgotten, they drop out of the whole...
Well, they don't drop out, but they become more of a symbol of how the Iraqw got the cattle. So the buffalo turns into the cattle then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting issue. I couldn't say anything on that or anything sophisticated on it. I don't know. I need to have more examples, and I'm not so familiar with the story that you referred to now.
Another quick question. I think you talked about. I think I may have missed it. Is the Lách stories in your records? Is it mostly human, or can it also be a hare?
No, the ones that the three that I've cited here as basis, at least the two from the Burger corpus, they are human, and there's no reference to hare. I think the same holds for Mous and Sangha, but Martin can remembers this more maybe better.
Yes.
Ones where we get the hare is this version in that's Freudis Nordbustad, and one of these, this is Camera, two versions in Camera, and I think this one gets the hare as well. Those are the two that I've come across.
Yeah, because in the story, in the files that Martin Mous has right now given me, there's almost parallel stories, one with the hare as the main character and one with Lách as a human protagonist.
Yeah, and that is right. That is exactly the case with these two episodes. They are parallel, but in these versions it's Lách, and in this one it's the hare. And I think I would have to look it up, that at least in one version Lách is identified with the hare explicitly.
Yeah, and also the other main difference that runs between the stories is right that in the human story the ogre has a human form, and in the hare story it's a hyena who's in that position. So it's like parallel systems.
Yes.
Thank you. I think those are all of the questions and comments for today. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that recordings of all of the presentations in the Rift Valley Webinar Series can be found on the Rift Valley Network YouTube page, and entries for each presentation are added to the Rift Valley bibliography. I would like to thank Roland again for his presentation and everyone else for participating today. I hope to see you again at our next webinar by Amani Lusekelo, entitled Mapping Expressions for Cannabis and Tobacco in Tanzanian Languages, with special focus on the Tanzanian Rift Valley area, on Wednesday, the 27th of November.